So I just recorded half of this episode and realized that my mic wasn't turned on. What's up, film buffs and moviegoers, and welcome to another episode of At the Movies on channel Trezzanator with me, your host, Steve Trezza. Now before we get started with this episode, I just want to say thank you for watching my video, thank you for watching my other videos if you have, and it would mean a lot for me if you subscribe to my channel. Please just hit that big subscribe button on the bottom of the screen. Thank you very much. So in this episode, I'm going to take you to film school and we're going to learn about film genre and the cycle of film genres. For example, the superhero movies, everyone is claiming is going to go the way of the Western. At one point, Westerns were on top of the world. Everyone loved Westerns. They were a huge hit. And then they kind of died out and we don't really see much Westerns anymore. And why is that? We're going to take a look at that. We're going to get right into that. Is that going to happen to superhero movies? It could, but it also couldn't. And there are ways that it could get out of that. And I will take a look at that later in this episode as well. But first, we need to take a look at what is film genre. All films can be broken down into two major genres, fiction and non-fiction, which would be a documentary. Now, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, we can go into more genres. Serious, which would be drama, horror, the scary movies, action, comedy. We can go even further and go into subgenres, which would be sci-fi, war, western, combination of genres like a romantic comedy. And then we can get more specific and go into different types of genres like, say, theme and setting. And if we did this, we'd just kind of be here forever, and this whole video would just be on that. But I think that my audience is pretty smart and I think you get the picture. So the theory of genre evolution, that is that all of these different genres will go through several stages in their life cycle. And now Louis Giannetti, who is the author of Understanding Movies, argues that there are 4 different life cycles for each genre, if they're lucky enough to get that far. The 4 major life cycles being primitive, classical, revisionist, and parody. And I'm going to actually say that there could be 5. Christian Metz argued that there is another cycle called the deconstructive, and that could be the 5th cycle, and I'll kind of get into that later in the video. But let's just take a look at what these cycles are and what kind of classifies the genre as how they go into them. So first, we're going to start off with primitive. Primitive is the beginning of the genre. It's when things got started. It's when things were experimental and they were still unsophisticated. But it could have a huge impact on the audience, and that's what will launch the genre into popularity. Many of the genre's conventions are established in this stage. Then we go into the second stage, which is the classical stage. This cycle will set the stage for the genre for future movies to come. We will then see other movies copying and paste off of this and being compared to this. You ever hear someone say, yeah, that movie was great, but it's not as good as X? That's where this cycle kind of comes in. You also hear people saying, hey, that movie's a classic. Usually refers to this stage of the genre cycle. Then we have the revisionist stage. The revisionist stage is usually political and it can break the rules a little bit. It's usually something different than we've seen from the norm. It's kind of grown up and changed a little. The revisionist stage is not afraid to take chances, take risks, and can be a step back from the conventions that we've seen in the earlier stages. Now, I found a description that I like online, and it's from a website called alienfilm.com, or maybe it's alienfilm.com. I don't know. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen right here, but it reads, this phase tends to be stylistically complex, appealing more to the intellect than to the emotions. Often the genre's pre-established conventions are exploited as ironic foils to question or undermine popular beliefs. Now, I liked that a lot, so I used it. Now, if you've ever seen something like Pulp Fiction, use that as an example. This is what this did for the gangster crime genre movies. It's something that had never been done before, that had never been seen before. It is a perfect example of a revisionist film. Next, we have the parody stage, and if you've ever seen a Mel Brooks movie, then you already know what I'm talking about with this. By the time movies hit this stage, they've become cliche, maybe even stale, and the audience knows almost what's going to happen, what's going to come already. So the parody comes in, kind of makes fun of that in a comedic manner. Mel Brooks does a fantastic job of this. He is the one filmmaker that does all these parodies off the top of my head that I can think of. I'm sure there are some others out there, but I think he's the most famous and he does it the best. Now, the parody stage is usually the nail in the coffin for film genres. After that, you can't really make a serious movie in this genre again because it's already been made fun of and no one can take it seriously. So that's usually where they will die out. That's where Giannetti said that the stage is done, and then maybe somewhere down the road when people are kind of over it, and then they can be reborn again into a new kind of primitive stage. That's when movies will come back. But now I'm going to take a look at the deconstructive stage. So if the genre wants to stay alive, it wants to keep afloat, it's going to have to change. And by doing that, it's going to have to take maybe some things from other genres. Maybe this is when we start seeing the combination of two different genres. A sci-fi horror movie, like a romantic comedy movie. We'll see them romantic action, you know, stuff like that. And we'll see these movies kind of take these things from other movie genres and then they'll create a new genre. So the conventions of the genre become less clear-cut. And a good example of this, and I know it's not a fantastic movie, but a good example is the movie Signs. Yes, that's right. I'm referencing Signs. It's a good movie with a terrible ending. Okay, so spoiler alert. If you're an alien race, why would you come to a planet with 80% water on it if water is your weakness and what kills you? Anyway, whatever. Back on track. Signs took elements from science fiction, fantasy, and from horror thriller and combined them perfectly into this movie. And by the way, M. Night, there's water vapor in the air and dew on the grass. And what the hell do they drink if they don't drink water? Oh god, that ending was so dumb. Okay, so now that we know what the genre cycles are, let's do some examples, and we'll do two. I'll give you horror, although horror is going to be kind of a little bit on the older side, and then we'll go into superhero movies because I'm a nerd and I know my audience. So let's start off with horror, and we'll start off at the very beginning. You can make a ton of these because there's a ton of different subgenres like slasher and monster flick and psychological horror. I don't know, you name it, there's probably, you can go back and research and figure out what the different ones of these are. But we'll start with one of the very first horror movies in the primitive stage, and that is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a silent horror film released in 1920 about a hypnotist who uses his victims to commit a series of murders. The film features dark, twisted imagery and shadows within its setting. The pacifist writers Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayr met after World War I and used their script as symbolism for their distrust of authority following their experience with the German military. The film and its unique visual film style had a major impact on other primitive horror films that followed soon after, including Nosferatu and Faust. Caligari had a large influence on Hollywood horror movies throughout the 20s and 30s, which included popular Universal Studios monster movies. You know, the classics such as Dracula and Frankenstein. These movies use Caligari-like antagonists, often with supernatural abilities to control others. Speaking of classics, that brings us to our next stage.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
One of the few sequels deemed superior to the original, Bride of Frankenstein. Sure, there are other classical horror movies that came before this, like Dracula and the original Frankenstein, but Bride of Frankenstein is the movie to define the classical horror stage. Film critic Roger Ebert said it best in his review when he said, "Some movies age, others ripen. Seen today, Whale's masterpiece is more surprising than when it was made because today's audiences are more alert to its buried hints of homosexuality, necrophilia, and sacrilege. But you don't have to deconstruct it to enjoy it. It's satirical, exciting, funny, and influential masterpiece of art direction." Bride of Frankenstein was way before its time and really defined the era of the classical horror movies of the 30s. You know, those monster movies that I just spoke about. And now for the revisionist.
But will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late! Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you! Invasion
of the Body Snatchers started to break the rules of horror and took styles from science fiction. You could even argue that this movie is more deconstructive than revisionist. The film is considered to be highly political in its symbolism, and at the time was compared to the dangers America could be facing for turning a blind eye to McCarthyism. This could be left to interpretation though, as other reviewers saw it to a burgeoning concern over homeland totalitarianism. Now for the parody!
Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Abby someone.
Abby someone. Abby who?
Abby normal.
Abby normal.
Mel Brooks steps in with Young Frankenstein. So if Mel Brooks has gotten a hold of your genre, it means it has reached the parody stage. By this time, most of the elements of your average horror movie were known by the audience and had become cliche. Brooks chose to shoot the movie entirely in black and white in an homage to the classical horror movies of the 30s. This was a rarity of the 70s, as color had been the norm for the past few decades. Many of the film's props were the same ones used in the original Frankenstein film, and even used 30s style credits, transitions, and cinematography. The result of the movie is a hilarious parody of the genre, of which the humor of the movie can still be enjoyed by viewers today. Alien combined elements of science fiction and horror to truly define the sci-fi horror thriller, almost creating a new genre that was kind of visited a little bit beforehand. With a claustrophobic setting, gruesome surprises, and unforeseen plot twists, Alien opened the door to a new type of horror movie that would continue to develop throughout the 80s. The Thing, Predator, and They Live, among many others, would soon follow as the genre began to adapt and evolve. Okay, so there you have the film cycles for the horror genre, or the horror monster genre if we want to get really specific. So let's take a look at something a little bit more modern with the superhero genre.
Hi there. Something wrong with the elevator? Going down.
Now, it was tough to choose between this and Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie, but Superman was really the first superhero movie that proved superheroes weren't just for kids and could be taken as a serious movie. Before Superman, the best quote-unquote superhero movie we had was Adam West's 1966 Batman movie. Superman saw much success, enough to spawn 3 sequels throughout the 80s, and without it we probably would have never gotten the Tim Burton Batman movies that followed a decade after.
You have a knack for getting in trouble.
You have a knack for saving my life. I think I have a superhero stalker.
I was in the neighborhood.
You are amazing.
Some people don't think so.
But you are.
While Superman and Batman broke the genre out in the primitive stage, it was Spider-Man that really made superhero movies hit their stride. You could argue that X-Men started the superhero boom that we are currently still in, but Spider-Man was the movie that really set up the classical story structure that superhero movies have been following ever since its inception. With nostalgia playing a role for comic readers of the 60s and 70s, and cartoon viewers of the 80s and 90s, superheroes finally grew up with their fan base led by the web-slinger himself.
He comes at me with the knife. Why so serious? He sticks the blade in my mouth. Let's put a smile on that face. And why so serious?
Nearly a decade into the superhero boom, Christopher Nolan took the genre and changed it permanently with The Dark Knight. This was the first movie in the genre that proved superheroes really were for adults. Nolan threw out the light-toned, happy-go-lucky theme of the past films and turned it into something more sinister, more darker. Nolan broke the rules with The Dark Knight and merged it into a dramatic action thriller filled with twists and turns the entire way through. The film even got Best Picture consideration and is widely regarded as one of the best superhero pictures of all time.
Look, Colossus, I don't have time for the goody two-shoes bullshit right now. And you are...
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage... What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
How do you make a successful parody of a genre that's continually leading the box office charts year after year? You take one of its most popular parody characters and you do it justice. That's exactly what Deadpool did. With a low budget and creative freedom, Fox finally made the perfect comic accurate movie in Deadpool, really capturing the essence of the character, something they failed to do in the past. Deadpool not only pointed out the cliches of other comic book movies, but it also wasn't afraid to break the third wall and make fun of its own previous X-Men faults. With an R rating, Deadpool made a killing and broke all sorts of box office records. Now, it may be a little early to say that superhero movies have entered the deconstructive phase, but with the success of Deadpool as a parody film, we have already started to see a decline in the genre. If the genre wants to survive, it's going to have to change. Something we kind of seen with the MCU movies like Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange, but was really perfected with Logan. As part superhero movie, part post-apocalyptic drama, Logan is a gore-filled action masterpiece. Fox really led the charge in giving the fans what they want. More adult, more R-rated, realistic superhero movies. If the genre wants to continue to grow and survive, superhero movies should take a page out of Fox's book with Logan. So there you have it. There's the theory of film genre cycles. Let's see what you guys can come up with in the comments below. If you can make your own genre cycles, I'll do my best to reply. If you haven't already, it would really mean a lot to me if you subscribe to my channel. Please head over there, check out all of my other videos, and hopefully I'll see you guys over there.